2. All right. Hello and welcome everyone to another Chat and Learn here with Power to Fly. My name is Mariella Marie, and as always, super excited to roll into this next hour with you all. I see that we've got folks turning their cameras on. I appreciate you. I see you. I'm going to give the official invitation in just a few moments when I go over these housekeeping rules. But we had a chance to chit chat with our guest speaker while we were checking our tech, and I know she's really excited to drop a lot of knowledge with you all today. So just to go over some quick housekeeping rules, we would love for you to participate. So of course, we don't need any reminders. Lots of crazy things going on in the world today. You could be doing anything else with your time, but you're deciding to be with us for the hour. So participate. Please turn your cameras on if you feel called to do so. You can add your pronouns if you would like. This is a safe space. We believe in visibility here. So, digital fatigue is real. I know that video fatigue is real as well, but really want to make sure that you maximize this next hour and get to ask your questions. You can participate by turning your cameras on, hopping off mute whenever you have something that you want to share, but I do ask that we be respectful of everyone's time and we have one person off of mute at a time. And I will flag folks when that opportunity comes up, and I'm going to sound like a broken record reminding you all to hop off mute or write in the chat box so we can have your live engagement here. And if you're rewatching this, great. You can still participate by being active as you take notes, or opening up multiple tabs as we hear resources being dropped here throughout the hour. If anyone is joining us live here and you have any sensitive information and you prefer to be kept anonymous, you can find me in the chat box under Mariella Marie. You can write to me privately there, and I will flag your question or your reflection and keep you anonymous with our guest speaker here. This is being recorded, so if you hop off mute, you will be featured in our live recording, which is another great reminder to stop multitasking now if you are listening live with us, because we do want you to participate. And I know that because we are kings and queens of multitasking, maybe that, we won't have the opportunity to write in the chat box or hop off mute. So close your tabs. I always say, if you want to take notes, rewatch this and take notes then, so that we can really have your live participation now in this hour. The last thing I'll say is we'd love for you to follow us on socials and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can keep up with all the great chats we've got in store. And I'm just going to pass the mic to our guest speaker now, Jennifer, who's calling from upstate New York. I'm going to give a shout out to everyone who's dropping in the chat box, letting us know where they're calling from. But Jennifer, our guest speaker, is calling from upstate New York. Let us know a little bit about yourself, how you came to learn about Power to Fly, and what you're excited to share with us today.
Great, thank you. Well, first of all, I'm the managing director at Relaunch, which is the pioneering company in the career reentry space. We've worked with over 200 clients on career reentry programs and programming. We help employers launch and expand their own in-house return to work programs and lead a community of nearly 100,000 relaunchers. We call professionals who are returning to work after a career break from 1 to over 20 years. In this role, I co-lead the consulting practice with the CEO and co-founder, Carol Fishman-Cohen, and I co-lead the STEM Reentry Task Force with the Society of Women Engineers, Jen Scott. Prior to this, I've been with Relaunch for about 18 months. And prior to that, you can see on the chart, I spent 35 years as a manager, engineer, executive at IBM. And I retired at the end of 2019. I did a ton of really, really cool things, but probably the coolest was in my last role, where I got to create the IBM Tech Reentry program, which was piloted in 2016. And when I retired, the program had expanded throughout the company and across several countries. And I had the privilege of working with over 100 relaunchers. So it's with that background, and even when in IBM, I was immersed in this return to work world. IBM was the first the first technical company to have technical skills relaunching. I got the great privilege to go to the White House to talk on a task force on this very important topic. That's what was a while ago. And just briefly, some of the things on the slide are my primary job at IBM was the last 6 years was to improve the representation of mid-career diverse technical talent. And so I got immersed in working across business units, across the world in different geographies to help solve this problem. And the Tech Reentry program was just one of those programs I created to help improve the representation. So when I retired, it was only made sense to go and help employers create their own return to work programs and help co-lead the STEM reentry task force. So it is my honor and privilege to do this job every single day. And you asked about how we know about Power to Fly. We have an excellent connection with Power to Fly. I'm not sure how long it's been, but through our CEO, Carol Fishman Cohen, and our Director of Marketing, Shannon, who's on the line. She's going to be dropping in some links if I mention something into the chat. So I just wanted to introduce her.
Awesome. Thank you for that beautiful introduction. I know you've got a wealth of knowledge to share. So before we jump into the awesome questions that folks have submitted previous to this chat, Jennifer, can you cover some of the principal themes you plan on discovering with us today?
Yes. So the first is what a relauncher, what a relauncher is and why there's a need for them. I'm going to spend that. There is no easy answer. I can't just say in one sentence the answer to that. So I want to go through that in some detail. And then the different kinds of returnships that are available, I will answer that question and then get into more in using my experience as hiring manager, as a hiring executive of these relaunchers, what type of things we look for. And those are just a few of the questions as the base. And then some of the participants sent some amazing questions. And I am hoping to get to every single one of them. And then we can open it up for additional questions. I do want to honor those who took the time to submit their questions in advance.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I know that you have some resources that I know you're going to drop throughout the conversation, but if you want to just touch on some of these, give us kind of a peek behind the curtain. And then, of course, I know that you've got folks here who are dropping things in the chat box as well, but I would love for you to cover this slide.
Yes, and I'll mention some of these in and out in many of the answers that I give. So first of all, visit the irelaunch.com website because it has a wealth of information for relaunchers. And if you happen to be an employer, there's also a tab with a lot of different things for you as well. I think that's the mini course. Wanted trying out because we offer a roadmap, return to work roadmap, and there's a mini course online that's part of that same relaunchers tab. And the conference, so we have 2 iRelaunch conferences a year, and it's a iRelaunch return to work conferences. And at those conferences, we match returners with employers. And the whole last day of the 3-day conference is dedicated to recruiting. So we have companies that sponsor the conference and they recruit. And the prior 2 days is just giving a wealth of information to the relaunchers. The admission for a limited time is free for the October conference. So check that out now. Also, a podcast series, and I don't think I mentioned this in the questions. The podcast series is phenomenal. I so enjoy listening to them. There are 201 podcasts, and they're really focused on relaunchers and all different advice from book authors to famous people to everyday relaunchers, relaunchers from all different industries and career coaches. It's a wealth of information and it's all on our website. And then the conference admission includes access to our product, Return to Work Roadmap, which is a step-by-step instruction on how to relaunch. So
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Already a wealth of knowledge. And I just want to shout out folks who are calling from all over here. I'm just going to go down the line before we hop into questions because speaking of, relaunchers from everywhere. So again, Jennifer is calling from upstate New York. I'm calling from Patagonia in Argentina. We've got Seattle on the line, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Illinois, New Jersey. We've got New York again, Buenos Aires, Virginia. We've got Minneapolis, Minnesota, Alpharetta, New Jersey, Georgia, San Jose, California, Milwaukee, Manhattan, Connecticut, Metro Atlanta, Metro area Atlanta. Great. So if you're just joining, go ahead and drop in the chat box because we would just love to know where you're calling from so that we can have, a source of reference as our guest speaker is tackling your questions here. You all have submitted some awesome questions previous to this conversation, so we're just going to take them one by one. If you hear your question come up and you're here live with us, just let us know. You can just drop in the chat box, let us know you're here. And then if you have a question that comes to mind, just drop that in the chat box as well, because we're going to leave some space at the end of this conversation to get to those live questions. So let's start with this one, Jennifer, this first question here. What is a returnship and why is there a need for them?
So I thought this would be a great question to start with to level set everybody. So think of a returnship as a college internship-like program that is tweaked for the mid-career returning professional. And the tweaks are what makes the returnships unique, like special programming and development, assigned mentors and buddies, other transitional support. They're often a longer duration, so more than 3 months. And that's a typical summer internship for a college student. And the program timing varies throughout the calendar year from employer to employer. Most programs avoid the summer months to start because it's a tough time of year for people coming back into work after taking a career break for childcare, because that's a really difficult time. So no matter where in the world the program is, the employers try to avoid starting in that summer months when the schools are out. Most returnships have an intent to hire philosophy, and that means it's the expectation rather than a possibility that the relauncher will be hired into the role at the end of the returnship. However, it's important to note that the role is not guaranteed, which gives the employer the option not to hire the relauncher at the end of the program. Typically, participants start a program all at the same time, as in a cohort model. And this is meaningful as they all are experiencing a time of significant personal and professional transition together. And that's really important to have that support. There's a great article our CEO, Carol Fishman Cohen, wrote called The Power of the Cohort. You can Google that. And it's a Harvard Business Review article. And it's really fantastic. It explains the need and why it's so important. Originally, returnships were created because hiring people who were returning to work after a multiple year career break was considered risky. And the returnship provided the opportunity to evaluate the relauncher on the basis of an actual work sample instead of a series of interviews. The permanent hiring decision doesn't have to be made until the internship period is over, which is important to note. However, this model has been so successful, the returnship model, because we have seen over 80% of returning professionals who complete the returnship program get hired. So that's a really great percentage. And because of this, we're seeing a few programs and employers offer what's called a direct hire program, where the relauncher is hired on as a full-time employee right from the beginning. And the programming is offered for a certain duration of time. So similar to a limited time cohort, which tends to be between 3 and 6 months, the direct hire would be hired on right away, and they would have programming during a certain number of months. And then after that, they would be a full-fledged member and there would be no change in their employment status. Thought it was important to make sure that I say that employers used returnships as a non-traditional way to find diverse talent, especially for those types of positions that are traditionally male-focused, like technology roles. And at least for now, returners are predominantly women. I think that will change as we progress into time and more men take time off for different reasons. And we've seen about a third of Fortune 500, of Fortune 50 companies had return to work programs as of the end of 2020, and more have been announced in the last 8 months. So that's important to note. And returnships are open to both men and women. And there are many other reasons why people take a career break other than childcare. For example, reasons also include elder care and extended illness and personal sabbatical and trailing spouse and military service, to list a few. We've had all kinds of reasons, traveling around the world, we've seen. So it doesn't just have to be childcare, although that is the majority of the relaunchers we see.
Well, thank you for setting that foundation.
It was a long-winded answer, but I thought it was important elements to convey.
Absolutely. And it's great to just set the stage and have that foundation to build on, because as you said, I mean, times are changing, and it's so great to hear, that we are trying to at least find alternative ways to diversify the industry, because of course we know what happens when we don't do that. So thank you so much for setting the stage there, Jennifer. And if you all see that Shannon is dropping some links in the chat, so feel free to click on those links, leave them open, and I encourage you to come back to the conversation so that you can pay attention to us and be present on this conversation. So let's move on to this next question here. Could you explain the different types of returnships available?
Yes, so that was also kind of in the level setting part of the questions. And actually, returnships and direct hire programs are two primary types of what we call return to work programs. So think of return to work programs as the bigger umbrella, and returnships and direct hire are part of and underneath those return to work programs. Within these two types of programs, there are a couple different application models that's important to understand. One is on-demand or rolling admissions, and that's where roles are opened on a continuous basis throughout the year. And another type is this cohort model that I talked about, where all the relaunchers begin at the same time. So those are the two primary different types.
And I'm curious to hear how you will respond to this question, because I know that a lot of folks who are looking to return to work for various reasons want to know what makes them stand out. So this question kind of brings to that. What makes relaunchers so attractive to employers?
And I have to say, I had to answer this question so many times in my IBM role. And whenever I spoke to management and executives and senior C-suite executives on why are we even doing this? Why are there programs like this? And so this is a great question. And first of all, relaunchers are highly educated. And I know most of all of you on the call are as well. Second, they have a lot of work experience. We've seen 70% of our relauncher community has at least 10 years of work experience prior to their breaks, which is big. So the relauncher is not just coming in after a half a year or a year. These are skilled people that are looking to get back into work. They're in a more stable life stage. And that means that there's fewer spousal or partner job relocations, which is pretty important. They bring a mature perspective to the workplace. And remember, they've worked already. They've worked on multi-generational teams with different personalities and have faced work deadlines and everything that encompasses that. And they don't need to be taught this. And finally, Well, I could go on, but I'll cut it here. Relaunchers have energy and enthusiasm that I have never seen in any other type of group that I have hired. They are so excited to be back at work, and managers consistently report back to us about this quality of relaunchers injecting their enthusiasm into their work teams. And I can personally attest to this trait and all the others I've listed.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing those stats and just what you've seen in your personal journey on, dealing specifically with this group of folks. So I know we've got a lot of people joining the call. I hope that this is music to your ears. Encouraging you to apply. Actually, let's get into a little bit more about applying for jobs. So let's move on to this question here. Can you explain the difference between a returnship program and trying to relaunch your career via general job applications? Are returnships like contract positions, or do they result in job offers?
Great question. Relaunchers have been successful applying to jobs that are not part of a returnship program for years. And in fact, most relaunchers return to work that way because most companies still don't have these types of programs. And however, they often report that a personal handoff of one kind or another was involved in this type of onboarding. And this comes back to the importance of developing or reinvigorating your professional and personal networks when you're ready to relaunch. And we give some specific examples of how to do this in our blog and also weekly in our podcast when relaunchers talk about their actual step-by-step process in returning to work. I also wanted to note that the data shows, I mentioned before, data shows that over 80% of the relaunchers who participate in returnship gets hired. And this whole notion I mentioned before of the intent to hire philosophy behind the program, both the employer and relauncher need to feel that there's a solid match when that happens. And occasionally a returnship will be extended if the hiring manager needs more time to make a decision. To answer about our returnships like contract positions, returnships, you will come on board as a non-permanent hire category. It could be a contract position, it could be a supplemental position, it could be an internship-like position. So you typically are not working for another agency, you are typically working for that employer.
And that's actually a good segue into this next question here. Should returners expect to re-enter the workforce at a lower position or lower pay than their previous experience? And if yes, how should we handle this?
Another great question. There is no expectation that relaunchers come in at a lower level, first of all, but some intentionally do target a lower level, especially if they've had a long career break. Because they're being cautious about their ramp up time and their capability. Know that some employers err on the side of bringing relaunchers back into the workforce at a more junior level than where they left, because they are also being risk adverse and want to set the relauncher up for success. Relaunchers we've interviewed who came in at a much lower level than they had left said to focus less on level and that it was more important to get your foot in the door, and then the raises and promotions will come along later. There are debates back and forth on what the best way to come about that is. The con is that if you accept a lower position, it might take a lot longer. But the flip side of that is if you never get in the door, you're not going to have a job. So it really depends on your situation, on how long you've looked. We've got a great article. I don't know, Shannon, if you're able to find it on Level, also a Harvard Business Review article that Carol Fishman-Cohen, our CEO, wrote. And Shannon, if you can put that in, if not, I can figure out a way to get that to everybody.
Yeah, it looks like Shannon's already dropped that in the chat box. So thank you for that.
Fantastic. Thank you, Shannon.
Awesome. And actually, we have a live question that rings true to actually the next question that I was going to read, speaking about, what's happening currently with this global pandemic. So Imen in the chat box writes, how do companies handle employees who are in transition due to the current pandemic? And I just like to piggyback, kind of tie the two questions together from a previously submitted question. Have returnships been successful during the pandemic? Specifically, are they as effective in a remote environment? Are they more or less successful in certain industries? Lots of questions there. Feel free to take your time unpacking them.
And I'm going to give it a shot, but if I don't clarify the live question, then if you could reiterate that, Mariella, again afterwards, and I'll try to address it. But I think I will. Yes, employers have continued to run their return to work programs during the pandemic, as they have had to shift all of their employees to virtual. Some employers were slower to get going or to figure out how to shift their return to work programs during the pandemic, but we have been so amazed at what the employers have done to make these programs still happen. So it's fun. They were in various stages when the pandemic hit. Some were launched and just started a week before, and then some were ready to launch that next week. So they were all in different times. They've been the whole process has proven to be very effective in a remote environment, just as effective as everyone had to transition to a remote environment in their regular roles. So it was very similar. In fact, we were very surprised when we heard this from relaunchers who took career breaks for childcare reasons, that the virtual relaunch was actually a gentler relaunch than the pre-COVID relaunch that involved going into an office on the same day you went back to work. So it was gentler. You were still there as a parent, so you could see your children for lunch and help out there and not waste the time commuting. So we were very pleasantly surprised at how that was for them. And I really wanted to make sure I got that point across. So now I can't remember the live question.
The live question, how do companies handle employees who are in transition due to current pandemic?
So we've seen a number of employers who have chosen, and what I didn't mention before is all returnships have a minimum career break to qualify for the roles. The vast majority of employers have a 2-year career break. Some had 1-year career break and some have 3-year career breaks. But what we have seen are many, many companies who have changed that career break requirement to 1 year. And that helps for those people who lost their jobs during the pandemic due to no reason of their own and really want to try to get back into it.
Great. Thank you for tackling that live question there. And I've got some private questions here. Don't worry, if you're here live with us, you're going to get a rewatch email, and all of the links and resources that Jennifer and Shannon are dropping today, they're going to be included there. So just check your emails for those resources. All right, let's move on to this next question here. What are some of the most valuable skills or attributes that returners can show or should develop?
Perfect. A few of the most valuable attributes you can demonstrate during your returnship are, first, your passion, your desire, and ability to learn new things. So critical. So that would be my absolute top. Knowing how and when to ask and when not to ask the right questions. It's incredible how much I saw this work and not work. So it's so important to ask a question when you don't know something. And if you're in a technical role and you're coding and hacking away, it is a waste of your time if you can't solve it in 36 hours or a day. it's not, you need to ask for help. So you're not helping the company by trying to do this on your own, and you've wasted a week. So that's what I mean. It's also important to know when not to ask the right questions, because if you've asked a question, a specific question of one of, let's say your project mentor, your team lead, and they answer it, and you go off, you kind of forgot what they said, you try to do something, you spend 5 minutes and you didn't really work on it, and then you realize you have to go back and ask the same question. Probably not a good idea, because it's showing that you weren't listening the first time. But there's many different reasons why it would make sense for you to go in with a spin-off of that same question, and to show that, well, I tried this and this and this, but I hit this stage, and here's what happened when I did, and I'm stuck here. So kind of, hopefully I'm explaining it pretty well, but that's just one little example. And then the last thing are the important emotional intelligence factors that play into how you work with others, how you address challenges and setbacks, how you celebrate successes, etc. It's so important. If you don't know anything about emotional intelligence, Google it. I'm sure there's a YouTube video on it, or an article on it. It is so critical. And we used to call some of these factors derailment factors in careers. So you can be doing the greatest work at work, but if you're kind of off on these emotional intelligence factors, it could cost you your job. So really, really important thing to address. And you can do that during your break and get up to speed on what those are.
Absolutely. And I can't believe I didn't say it in this conversation to kick us off, but I am obsessed with speaking about the importance of emotional intelligence and how we need to develop more emotional intelligence at home and in the workplace and in our communities. We practice more empathy, more self-awareness, have these social skills that will help build us up instead of building walls around each other. So I love that you're pointing that out. And I mean, if this is the demo that, should be listening to, develop your emotional intelligence, that will give you a kick in the door faster, maybe, if someone who, has low empathy levels, but they're trying to, make really big decisions for their team, and then they end up suffering or having other folks on the team suffer. So I definitely echo what Jennifer is saying. Emotional intelligence is so important, and I encourage you all to do some research there.
And Mariella, I'm so glad that you said that, and that it means so much to you. It meant so much to me that in the IBM Tech Reentry orientation that I held when we were getting together in person, I had a whole module, an hour module on emotional intelligence. And there are quizzes out there that you can take to just get an idea of what it means. And in summary, you can find out, add up the columns to see how far off you are or how right on you are. And by looking at the questions, you can kind of gauge what kind of things you can do to improve.
I love that. I love that. There are more of us speaking in the workspace just about the importance of emotional intelligence. I think it's considered a soft skill, but I would actually have it be a bridge between soft and hard skills. I mean, I would love to hear your opinion on that later. But let's move into these other questions, because we've got a lot of questions here. A lot of folks also with private messages. I just want to let everyone know we will reserve the last about 10 minutes of this conversation to get to some of your live questions. And I will give preference to folks who want to hop off mute with those questions, so that we can try to get some of those live questions answered. Okay, so how can we show that experience managing family, including schedules, finances, etc., can translate to current business needs without getting shoehorned into an admin assistant position?
First off, we don't think you should emphasize your parenting skills as reasons to hire you. Mostly because you may be speaking to someone who is a super parent themselves as a hiring manager, and who has managed their parenting. Let's say they have 5 kids and a full-time management role at the same time. They're not going to be impressed that you were able to juggle the responsibilities of parenthood without working a job at the same time. It's better, we feel, to focus on other transferable skills that you may have developed before your career break, or maybe in a volunteer role during your career break. And one example that I love was a relauncher who was relaunching into a program management role. And during her career break, it was a multi-year career break, so 8 or 10 years, she volunteered at her son's marching band. And it was a wreck. It was a huge marching band. Anyone with kids in marching band or had been marching band yourself or know anything about marching band, there's a ton of kids, there's uniforms, there's who's got to be where, there's multi parts of the uniforms, everything has to be organized. So she was asked, or they asked for a volunteer to coordinate this. And so she realized that she was not up on the latest program management tools. So she investigated that first. And she created an entire spreadsheet on who needed to be where, who was getting what uniform, who was this size, what parent volunteers. And she used that as an example in her interview of this is what I did. And by doing that, I became familiar with these new program management skills. And I also I set a precedent and created a new model for anyone who comes after me with the marching band. So she created a lasting impression. So I love that example because it's meaningful on so many levels. Or you can take classes in your chosen field to signal how serious you are about returning to work in that field and to update skills at the same time. So those are a few things that you can be doing.
Awesome. Thank you for that example. And thank you for the clarification there. I know a lot of people have that question, and I know that there are different responses as well. So it was nice to hear, this tangible example from someone who has been able to have those transferable skills still speak to the hiring manager. Okay, so let's move on to this next question here. I've been out of the working world for 8+ years. What has changed in recruiting and job searching from then to now?
Short answer, a lot. A lot has changed. Video interviews and screening, LinkedIn profile building, including now this personal lead designation, becoming a must-have in the job search. So many companies will search, do an automatic resume search. And if you don't have these must-have code words in your resume, you're going to be passed over. And everything being virtual because of COVID. And we've seen some fields of work have changed completely or don't exist anymore. And some fields are much newer, like data science. The role of social media in the job search is huge now. And as a connection tool, so the connection tool, the job search, it's not just for looking at your friends' pictures online. So it's really, if you are not versed in social media, there are many, many ways to get up to speed, including the ever popular YouTube channel.
Absolutely.
So also one other thing, research the companies in your industry and the products, services, language, and acronyms used now, and study them. Learn about and understand the controversies and latest thinking in your industry, and be prepared to discuss your opinions and thoughts with the hiring manager or with anyone else in the process of recruitment. Follow the experts in your field closely as part of your updating. And these are all things you can draw upon in your interview.
Beautiful. Thank you for that clarification. All right. So we've got about 20 minutes left. I told you all that time would fly. So we'll cover a couple more previously submitted questions, and then we'll dive into some of these live questions here that folks are writing in the chat box. Okay. So I'm sure that applicants with a career gap are expected in returnship programs. What is the best way to address this on LinkedIn or in our resumes? How should we address the gap in interviews, especially when the reason or reasons are too personal for comfortable disclosure?
So I was going to address this question even before I even knew it was someone's question. It is so important, and we get asked this all the time. Yes, the first part of this question is correct. To qualify a returnship program, you must have had a career break, which is fantastic. As I mentioned before, LinkedIn has introduced personal leave designations to show a career break if you choose to use them. You don't have to, but the idea that LinkedIn has acknowledged that this personal leave designation was important enough to include as part of the profile building is a major step in normalizing career breaks. So we think it's fantastic. About your resume, if your break isn't clearly referenced, you may be passed over for a returnship role, period. I remember how difficult it was for the IBM recruiters having to carefully sift through each of the hundreds of resumes, trying to piece together if a person had the minimum career break or not. It was like a big puzzle. And that's why I recommend making career breaks crystal clear on your resume. And as an aside, I recommend avoiding using cute phrases like CEO of the Smith household or chairwoman of the home on your resume. We have seen our fair share of that. And there's just so many, you could just say career break. In interviews, the important fact is that you had a career break. The reasons why you took a break are really no one else's business but your own, and yours to divulge or not. We're constantly training managers to the same thing, to not, the employers we work with, to not ask this. And if the relauncher is comfortable, they might divulge it. If not, and it's really not your business. And a way to address this, if the topic does come up in an interview, is to simply say you took a career break for family reasons or for personal reasons. That's it. Leave it at that.
I love that. Keeping it crystal clear so that you don't have to have people put the pieces of the puzzle together, and we can just kind of move along a little more quickly there. So, and especially with the insane amount of, resumes and cover letters and interviews that hiring managers have. You were saying hundreds. So just to kind of stand out from the crowd and also just nip it in the bud, be clear about it, and also keep it, concise and keep the sweet words out that you said. I really like that advice. Okay, let's move on to this next question here. Must relaunchers prepare to hit the ground running, or is it okay to expect a period for ramp up to the role?
Most employers with the return to work programs are not expecting relaunchers to hit the ground running. So hopefully that's good news. They understand that there is going to be a skilled ramp up period and are prepared to help mitigate gaps. Having said this, relaunchers take some time to come up to speed prior to their relaunch. And they do this by taking one or more online courses. And there's so many options available now, Coursera, edX, for example, and many are free, or taking in-person courses at university or community college. Investigate certificate options in your field of interest. And lastly, there's always the free resources I've mentioned many times on the internet, including YouTube tutorials that have tutorials on every topic under the sun. And I think you missed a question that I think would be important for people to ask about the person who moved from Texas to California.
Absolutely. We can go back to that one for sure.
Okay.
I'll read it right now.
Okay.
I recently moved from Texas to California. How do I find returnships in my area that will actually be helpful with zero personal connections?
We also get this a lot. That's why I wanted to address it. And there are a lot of actions you can take to find returnships in your area. First, at irelaunch.com, we keep a running list of all the return to work programs that we've identified. You can also join the private moderated iRelaunch Return to Work forum on Facebook and participate in the discussions. Join the iRelaunch LinkedIn group. Don't forget your university and professional associations. Don't forget to join them on LinkedIn. Attend a Return to Work conference where there's an entire day dedicated to recruiting. Check out the STEM Reentry Task Force website to find employers who are hiring. You can go to reentry.swe reentry.swe.org to see them. Join the relaunchers relauncher newsletter, relaunchers newsletter for updated hiring. And all of these resources are accessed through our relaunch.com website. You can also connect through in-person or virtual meetup groups. There are meetup groups all over the country on so many topics, like hiking to professional interests like data science. And lastly, identify professional associations and societies that have local chapters and investigate their local events, their programming, and mentor opportunities. These types of actions will help update and expand your professional network. And the people you meet through these associations may know of employers who are hiring relaunchers.
Beautiful. I love that you're just laying it all out for us to then see how, the connections can be made, and encouraging folks, to apply and to essentially, show their best, put their best foot forward, because this is an opening opportunity for folks returning to work. Thank you for that, Jennifer. All right, so let's move on to this next question. How do people making a large career change tend to fare when seeking returnships? I'm switching from nonprofit management to the corporate sector, but I'm also curious about people relaunching in unfamiliar roles or fields.
So another great question. Typically, returnships are not for people who are looking for a complete career change. So know that. However, if you have transferable skills that are relevant to a new field, then definitely apply and be prepared to make the case as to why. We've seen plenty of relaunchers make a career transition when they relaunch and not do it through a returnship. We've also seen relaunchers who have had large career shifts. And when they've shifted industries but kept their core skills, they've been able to demonstrate how their core skills were acceptable and applicable to this new industry. As most returnship roles require some former experience, you'll really need to demonstrate a level of related competency. For example, I worked with an electrical engineer who took courses during her career break to receive her data science certification. And she qualified for her returnship, which was seeking data scientists, because she had past technical experience, even though she didn't have direct experience as a data scientist. So that's important to understand.
Great. All right, so let's move on to this next question. We've got about 11 minutes left. So we got 2 more questions that you folks have submitted previously, and then I'm going to be looking out to see if someone wants to hop off mute for the last 10 minutes.
Great.
Okay, so for returnships, are hiring managers looking broadly and holistically at candidates and hiring for potential and an eagerness to learn, or are they taking a narrower view and hiring for a short list of skills?
The short answer, it depends. No, it really does depend on the program. Employers with mature return to work programs consider candidates with broader related skills that with some training can be productive in the new skills. And we also see that this is changing. For example, Amazon announced recently that they were expanding their program to 1,000 relaunchers. And in that announcement, they mentioned they have a special recruiting team for the returnship program, focusing on potential when they're hiring relaunchers into their program. So specifically, they're focusing on potential and not as much on past. So this is the first one we've heard of. We might see more and more.
All right, so let's end the previously submitted questions, speak about ageism in the workplace. So I'm over 50 and losing my mind without work. Employers can do the math, even if they don't intend to discriminate. But I've been asked how long I plan to keep working. I met with skepticism when I explained that I really like working. How do I convey that I am returning and not looking to retire in a year or 2?
Ageism is definitely out there, and the most effective antidote and tool you have is subject matter expertise. As relaunchers, you can especially benefit from a personal handoff. So, is there a way you can be in touch with former colleagues or reconnect with former networks or connect with new networks, even virtually in our current environment? This professional network first appreciates you for your subject matter expertise and institutional knowledge, because that's what they know you as and from, and can recommend you on that basis alone. Coming in from a position of strength, resting on your knowledge before the question of how long you plan to work would even come up should be effective for you. And beyond that, I would write out a script for myself about the answer to the question, something like, I'm more energized and more focused, and I feel I have so much more to contribute now more than ever. And I plan to do this for the next at least 15 to 20 years or whatever. So think about that script and have that written out in case you get that question.
I love that, taking that firm posture and kind of predicting what has been, the noise that happens with ageism in the workplace and just being ahead of that so you can kind of tackle that before that question comes up. So thank you so much for that, Jennifer. Does anyone want to hop off mute and ask Jennifer a question or, voice a reflection? I would love to give time for you to do that. So I'll hold for a light pause to see if someone wants to be courageous enough to hop off mute. Now is your time to shine.
It could also be a clarifying question if something I said was not clear.
Hi, thank you so much for doing this today. My name is Wendy, and I'm just curious about the returnships. And for every job posting that we see, are they typically trying to fill one position, or will there be a group of people? And then the second part of my question is, how large are these cohorts? How large do they tend to be?
Great question, Wendy, and thank you for speaking up and being the first. I appreciate that.
Sure.
And I know Mariella appreciates that. So I'll answer the last question first. Cohorts vary in size. Returnship cohorts vary in size you could have a cohort as few as 2 and up to 30. So it really, or even over 30. So it really depends on how the company has structured them. Typically, if an employer is piloting a program, the size will be a little less. And then as they get comfortable and as they expand to different business units and geographies, those cohorts might increase. And they might have cohorts for different parts of the world, wherever they are. And we have seen that. We work with a bunch of employers doing their global programs, and they have different cohorts depending on where in the world they are located. And your first question that's a great question. I'm glad you asked, because it also varies. A great place to look at a bunch of different sites is in the link that I think Shannon posted earlier, that I mentioned, where iRelaunch has the list of all these employers we know that have return to work programs. And you can get an idea of their landing pages, even if they're not actively hiring right now. The ones that are hiring right now, some will have a generic position description on a ACE company relauncher. And they might be hiring 10 people. You don't know that. But they have one offering, one role that you can apply to with multiple positions under it. Other companies have every single position. They have a separate link, a separate application process. So it really, really varies. And what I would suggest is to just be aware and really read through on the webpage all the information first before going into apply to a job, to make sure it's something that you are going to be interested in. Hopefully that
Awesome.
helped.
Thank you. Very helpful.
Yes. Thank you, Wendy, for hopping off mute. Good luck to you. We have time for one more quick and concise question. If someone wants to hop off mute, now's your time to shine.
I would love to ask this question.
Go for it.
As we talked about emotional intelligence, my name is Afreen. Thank you so much for this session. You underscored the importance of demonstrating emotional intelligence. If you have only one interview to sort of show this important skill, what are some examples that you can use to underscore that, yes, you are an emotional intelligent person after working for 15 plus years? Thank you.
That's a great question. And I think by you want to be able to show how you can convey information. You want it, like one of the comments I mentioned on it, that it's so important to convey with emotional intelligence is how you team. Maybe give an example of a complicated teaming situation that you had and how you handled it. And you know, all these employers, not all, many employers will ask, so what is your least favorite trait? I think they've gotten away from doing that, but if they do, it's a point to say, well, or a favorite trait, you can say, I really like how I've been able to handle setbacks in my past career, in my past volunteer role, and let me give you an example of one of those and how I handled it. So you can try to answer it there. And Afreen, where quickly are you in Mid-Hudson Valley?
Hastings on Hudson.
Okay, I'm in Red Hook, New York, at the very right up there. So anyway, thank you for joining. Thanks for asking.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So thank you so much. I love that we're rounding out this conversation with a little bit of emotional intelligence. So thank you for hopping off mute with that question. We've got 2 minutes left. So Jennifer, any food for thought? I mean, you've covered so much in this past hour. Please leave us with some food for thought just to end this conversation with, and then remind us how we can be in touch with you when we end this conversation.
One of the most important things that you can do for success in a long-term career, and especially in a career change, is to be yourself. You will have the opportunity to interview with so many different types of employers. Hopefully you'll have that opportunity. And not only will they be checking you out, you need to check them out. Are they accepting you for who you are? Have they created an open environment where you can truly be your best self? Those things are so, so important. And every company has their own type of culture. There are different ways to be able to find out about that culture. If I was taking a new job right now, and actually when I joined iRelaunch, I was able to talk to a number of the team members to really understand what that culture was. I kind of knew what it was before I joined, and I was thrilled, but it just kind of cemented how important this culture is. And every culture is not going to be the same. You know, what people are looking for in a culture is not going to be the same. And that's why there's people working successfully in every employer around the world. So be in it, try to find an environment that where you can be your best authentic self. And good luck. And please look at all the resources. The Return to Work roadmap is a great place to start. And also the irelaunch.com website.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Thank you, Shannon, for just dropping all the links in the chat box as well. Great team. So I imagine you all do some great work there at when you're just trying to just encourage people to be their best selves. Jennifer, thank you for leaving us with this awesome food for thought. We've got folks just singing your praises in the chat box, saying that this was such a helpful session and they feel more encouraged. So thank you, everyone who's joined us live. If you're rewatching this, thank you for rewatching. Good luck to everyone. And Jennifer, it's been such a pleasure. We hope to have you back on another chat.
Oh, would love to. And Mariella, thank you so much. And thanks for including this important topic.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
All
Have
right.
a great rest of the day, everyone.
Yes, we'll see you on the next chat, everyone.